She swore she'd never fall for him, the loud, reckless photographer next door who turned her peaceful world upside down. Can she cope with this silly neighbor? What do you think? Well, let's dive into this fascinating story. I bet you'll love this one. Grab your popcorn and sit tight as we go on this journey together. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel as I take you on this journey. This story begins at Yvonne's apartment. She is a renowned artist, well known for her professional drawings. Here we meet Jax, a photographer who just moved into the compound. However, Vani is not pleased with how noisy Jax is about everything he does. But that's why we are here, to find out if she will ever have anything to do with Jax, her new neighbor. On this beautiful morning, Vaughn was still in bed. She stretched her body before getting up for the day, then went to the restroom to wash up. Afterward, she went to her room to change her outfit before heading downstairs to the kitchen to make some coffee. After that, she went outside for a walk when one of her close neighbors, Faruqi, stopped her with praises. They exchanged greetings, and Faruqi told her they had a new neighbor. Vaughn was surprised but brushed it off, asking if he wouldn't cause any issues. Faruqi assured her that he wouldn't. After that, she took her leave while Faruqi continued showering her with praises. Later that evening, Vaughn was in her studio, putting on a peaceful, quiet song as she began her drawing. The next morning, Vaughn was having a peaceful sleep when the loud music from her new neighbor woke her up. She got off the bed to confront him, went downstairs, and knocked at his door. Jax came out to check who it was, only to find a beautiful woman standing at his doorstep. They stared at each other for a minute. Jax stretched out his hand to Vaughn and introduced himself, but Vaughn ignored the handshake and simply said her name. Jax tried to welcome her inside, but Vaughn told him his music was too loud and asked him to reduce it. Jax nodded in response and used the remote to lower the volume. He asked her if that was okay, but Vaughn ignored him and left while Jax kept staring at her before going back inside. That same day, Vaughn was drawing but got distracted by Jax's noisy guests. Frustrated, she quickly went downstairs, yelling at Jax and his guests, asking if they weren't aware that this was a civilized area. Surprisingly, Jax didn't even get offended. Wow, what a gentle guy. He even invited Vaughn to a party he was hosting the next day. However, Vaughn arrogantly told him she wasn't interested and warned him to stay in his lane before going upstairs, still throwing harsh words at them. The next evening, Vaughn was in the living room with her friend. She had already explained everything to her, but her friend tried to convince her to attend the party. Vaughn looked at her in disagreement and said, Jax might be 30, but he acts so immature. I mean, how can someone play music so loud? Gosh, he's so annoying. Her friend teased her by asking if Jax was cute. Vaughn replied that she hadn't noticed. While they were still chatting, they heard a loud noise coming from Jax's room. Her friend was vibing to the music, but Vaughn immediately stood up and stormed to Jax's apartment. Her friend, surprised, followed her. They both knocked on the door, and one of Jax's friends opened it. Vaughn was shocked to see Faruqi among them. He was the last person she expected to be there. She started yelling at him, but before long, Jax stepped in. Seeing Vaughn in his apartment, he walked up to her, trying to dance with her, but Vaughn pushed him away. She then noticed that her friend was also trying to get along with them, so she quickly grabbed the drink from her and handed it over to another guy. She demanded that they lower the music, but Jax wasn't even paying attention. All that mattered to him was the party. This made Vaughn furious, and she left. When she got back to her apartment, she was already exhausted and sat down. Her friend tried to support her, but in reality, she was mesmerized by the cute guys she had seen at the party. Vaughn started teasing her with insults, and they both continued their conversation. As they went upstairs, her friend reminded her that she had a meeting with a client the next day. Later that night, while Vaughn was asleep, Jax continued playing loud music, but she somehow managed to fall asleep. The following morning, Vaughn was still in bed, very tired. She stretched her body several times before finally getting up and heading to the kitchen, still stretching. Wow, she thought. I guess I didn't sleep well last night. Later that day, Vaughn was working on a drawing when she heard a knock on her door. She quickly went to check and realized it was Jax. She asked him what he wanted, but instead of answering, Jax told her to open the door because they needed to talk. Vaughn refused, saying she wouldn't open the door unless he apologized. Right then and there, Jax apologized for the previous night. She then opened the door, and Jax walked in roughly, as if he owned the apartment. He sat down without permission, shocking Vaughn. Jax asked Yvonne to sit down in her own house. Really? This was serious. After hesitating, she finally sat down and asked him what he wanted to talk about. Jax then told her he was there to plead on Farouk's behalf so she wouldn't report him to the landlord. Yvonne assured him she wouldn't. Jax smiled, staring at her, and then quickly sat on her couch, saying, "You know, I think we should exchange contacts immediately." Yvonne replied, "No way." Even so, Jax kept trying to convince her, saying that instead of stressing herself by knocking on his door whenever there was an issue, she could just call him. Eventually, they exchanged contacts. As he was leaving, he suddenly gave her a peck on the cheek. Yvonne was shocked, but she shook it off and went back to her work. 2 days later, Yvonne was at the pool wearing a sexy outfit as she relaxed and cooled off. Meanwhile, Jax was already approaching her. As he got closer, he playfully tried to touch her, but Yvonne immediately shouted at him not to. She said she was already scared he might push her into the water and asked for his help to get up. Just as she was about to stand, she slipped, nearly falling into the pool. Jax quickly tried to catch her, but unfortunately, they both tumbled into the water. They stared at each other for a moment. Wow, this is getting interesting. Guys, what do you think about them? Anyway, let's continue. That same evening, Yvonne was trying to work on a design, but she just couldn't get Jax off her mind. She kept having flashbacks of what had happened at the pool. The next morning, Yvonne and her friend were hanging out when they ran into Jax and his friend. Yvonne had been smiling, but the moment she saw Jax, she quickly straightened her posture and maintained her composure. They all stopped, and Yvonne's friend exchanged pleasantries with the guys. Jax noticed Yvonne's reaction and asked if she was okay. She replied, looking uncomfortable, I'm okay." She and her friend then walked away, while Jax kept staring at her until his friend grabbed him, urging him to go inside. Honestly, guys, I think Jax is already crushing on her. I mean, Yvonne is a very beautiful lady. Any man would want to have her. What do you all think? Back at their place, Yvonne and Ketchy chatted, and Ketchy teased her about liking Jax. But Yvonne denied it, saying she was only interested in responsible guys. Is she really telling the truth? Because her eyes say something else. They continued their conversation, laughing. Meanwhile, at Jax's apartment, he and his friend Dazi were discussing business. Jax was doing well and making big money. Then Dazi suddenly asked him what was going on between him and Yvonne. Jax insisted that nothing was happening, but Dazi didn't believe him. He could already see that Jax was falling for her. Jax, however, acted like he was just trying to play smart because he thought Yvonne was too uptight. But Dazi advised him to give it a try. "Who knows? She might be the one for you," he said. They continued their conversation. The next morning, Yvonne was about to head out for a workout when Jax came out to join her. She was not pleased and yelled at him to stop bothering her, warning him not to follow her. Then she walked away. Later that day, Yvonne was coming downstairs when Jax stopped her, asking her to have dinner at his apartment. Yvonne turned him down, saying she already had her own food, but Jax kept insisting. Annoyed, she pushed him away. Finally, Jax pleaded with her to at least come and see some of his photography work. Reluctantly, she agreed and walked away. That same evening, Yvonne was in her living room when Jax arrived with a bottle of wine. She collected it and went inside to get some glasses. A few minutes later, Jax was already checking out some of Yvonne's artwork, impressed by what he saw. He tried to look at one of her unfinished pieces, but Yvonne stopped him, saying she never showed anyone her work until it was complete. Jax kept pleading, but she refused. Instead, he offered to buy the artwork. After much conversation, Yvonne told Jax she would love to see some of his photography as well, so they both went to Jax's apartment. Once there, Yvonne scrolled through his laptop, looking at his work. She was impressed. After some time, Jax admitted, "I want you, Yvonne." But to his surprise, Yvonne turned him down. "I can't be with an irresponsible guy who doesn't even know what he wants," she said. Wow, those were some harsh words. But she had to say it. Jax, clearly upset, stood up and walked to the door. He opened it and gestured for Yvonne to leave. Back in her apartment, Yvonne sat down, thinking about whether she should apologize or not. After some time, she lay on her bed, lost in thought. The following morning, Yvonne was packaging Jax's order and went to deliver it to him. Jax tried to ignore her, but Yvonne insisted that they talk. Jax coldly told her there was nothing to discuss and simply asked her to send her account details so he could make the payment. Jax made the payment and went inside, opening the craft drawing. He stared at it, thinking to himself, she really does know how to draw. 2 days later, while Yvonne was busy trying to complete her work, Jax was also in his apartment working, with loud music blasting. Frustrated, Yvonne went over to tell him that his music was too loud and that he should at least lower the volume a little. Jax ignored her and continued his work. After a few minutes of waiting for a response, Yvonne gave up and left. Later that day, Yvonne's friend, Kechi, came over and they chatted about everything that had been going on. The next day, Jax was at the pool when a girl who had also come to cool off started playfully flirting with him. Not long after, Yvonne arrived. The moment she saw what was happening, she turned around and left, visibly upset. Jax hurriedly chased after her. "Why are you leaving?" he asked. Yvonne, trying to play it cool, expressed her anger but still pretended not to care too much. Meanwhile, deep down, she already liked Jax. She hated seeing him with other random girls. After their brief argument, she walked away. As soon as she got inside, she called Kechi. "I'm ready to meet the guy you wanted to introduce me to," she said, trying to distract herself from Jax. That same day, Jax and his friend Duzzy were in the living room playing video games. Duzzy was surprised that Jax had been indoors for the past week. "This isn't like you," he said, noticing the change in his friend's behavior. Later that night, Yvonne was on a call with Kechi, trying to decide what to wear for her upcoming date. She wanted to look so good that the guy would be instantly attracted to her. Suddenly, the power went off, leaving her stranded in the dark. She quickly called Farouk to ask what was wrong. Still on the call with Kechi, Jax showed up at her door, asking if she was okay and offering to take her to his apartment so she wouldn't have to stay alone in the dark. But Yvonne, being stubborn, refused. Kechi, however, encouraged her to go with Jax and stay there until the power was restored. After much hesitation, Yvonne finally agreed. She went upstairs to grab a few things and then left with Jax. When they arrived at his apartment, Jax offered her a cup of coffee. As they sat together, he looked at her and asked, "Would you mind if I took some pictures of you? I'd really love that." Yvonne agreed, and Jax excitedly started taking her photos in different poses. After the photo shoot, he walked her to her room and asked if she needed anything. Yvonne assured him she was fine. After freshening up, she came back downstairs and they sat together, chatting about their lives. Later, they decided to watch a movie. As they got hungry, they both went to the kitchen to grab something to eat, continuing their conversation. That night, they had fun together, getting to know and understand each other better. But then, something led to another. Jax leaned in, attempting to kiss Yvonne. Surprised, she quickly stood up, wanting to leave. But Jax stopped her. "What do you want from me?" she asked, staring at him. Jax took a deep breath and with sincerity in his voice said, "I really want you, Yvonne." After a heartfelt conversation and confessing his feelings for her, he gently held her hand and asked for permission to kiss her. Yvonne, feeling the moment, finally let her guard down, and they shared their first kiss. The next morning, Yvonne was still at Jax's house, while Jax was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for her. He had planned to surprise her with breakfast in bed, but by the time he was done, Yvonne was already awake and had come to meet him in the kitchen. Smiling, he handed her the food, and they chatted as they ate. During their conversation, Jax suggested taking her out on a date that night. To his delight, Yvonne agreed. Later that night, Yvonne excitedly prepared for the date. She danced around her room, looking for the perfect outfit to wear. Meanwhile, Jax was already waiting for her in the living room. When she finally came downstairs, looking absolutely stunning, his heart melted. He couldn't help but praise her beauty. "Wow, you look breathtaking," he said, making her smile. With that, they left for their first official date. Thanks for following this amazing journey in my world of movies. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories. See you in our next movie.